Wow. You can turn it on if you like. MJ, please. Well, good morning and welcome everybody to this morning's workshop. We've got an apology from Dean, and I'm not sure if Dane's back in the country or not, but we will follow on. Rog?
This worship, I will have to excuse myself just before 10 through to 11 o'clock to be on a Zoom meeting to look at directors for Southern Waters, and then I'll come back and that's done.
Very good.
That's okay.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Oh, well, we'll start the day with there's no conflicts of interest in any of the matters this morning.
Not for a workshop, you would expect.
No, I don't think so for a workshop. Right, topic number 1 is the government reform update. Peter.
Thank you. So this is just a quick update on matters that have arisen over the last few weeks since we last spoke. The local government amendment bill passed its first reading on the 5th of August. Clarifies chief executive management obligations as indicated there, and also confirms that elected members are not prevented from seeking independent advice from another person. There's a public submission process. Suggested no CDC submission is put forward for that. So there's the local government systems improvement amendment bill, which we've been tracking for some time, is expected to pass next month. Just to remind members that refocus the purposes of local government, puts greater emphasis on core council services, stronger performance measurement, increased transparency in spending, and improved accountability and regulatory relief and reduced compliance burden are the main things that are occurring through that. The rates capping legislation is expected. There's an expectation for a bill to be introduced before the end of the month. And there's also a fast-track infrastructure cost recovery proposal amendment to the LGA as an interim step towards development level levies from 2029. And that would enable councils to recover growth-related capital expenditure associated with fast-track developments, and will be introduced as part of the local government system improvements amendment bill. Head start proposals, there were 18 apparently, with cabinet consideration in September, and some other updates. There's open for submissions for a building amendment bill, which I think we've discussed previously. Dog control guidelines, these are not legislation, will be introduced to promote dog ownership. Full legislative overhaul in 2027, and the South Island Growth Plan National Plan announced policy to bolster growth on the South Island, and the current focus is apparently Christchurch Hospital in Queensland Transport and Tourism Initiative. That slide shouldn't be there. Your worship, take any questions?
Oh, questions for Peter?
Just comment on that South Island growth plan. The South Island's growing flat out anyway. The problem we've got is infrastructure, particularly around road. We don't, the growth's happening. If politicians are talking to government, then they should be reminding them that. We'll drive the growth. We want infrastructure to work it.
Roger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Peter, just on the Head Start proposals, do you have a timeline for how that all going to roll? So when do we hear back? When can we expect whatever's the unexpected, I suppose? I might ask Steve would like to comment there. Would you like me to?
No, I mean, they didn't have hard
No, they didn't.
I mean, September was a loose date. I mean, we know the election's in October, right? So, and we know the intention was to make announcements before the election. So that's really is that loose period of September. I'm expecting some word in some form.
Yeah. I might, through you, Worship, we've received a week or so ago a nice little chart of some of that lays out these respective timelines. They're tentative, produced by Simpson Greason. I can provide that to councillors after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And just to add to that, with our last mayoral Zoom, Warren Ulasili from the DIA, I asked him the question about did they have a big enough team to handle the 18 proposals that were put forward, because of course it's going to be a lot of work within that month. And he assured us that they did. The next steps from that were they would filter all the applications, and then they will be presenting to the ministers, who will then take it to Cabinet what they see as appropriate to continue it. So it's got to go to Cabinet.
Yeah.
After they've run the filters over it.
It'll be quite a long process then.
So yeah, it'll either be one or the other. It'll be one or the other. And they're sort of looking at which ones can continue.
Yeah.
And there'll be others that possibly need to be getting back in the room and having a conversation, and there'll be others that will be straight into the backstop.
I wonder, Your Worship, whether because of the off ramps and whether people get pushed into something that they want, there'll be off ramps, and then all of a sudden we're all on the backstop. It's all been a waste of time, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
By February next year, there could be a lot of scatter on the off ramps.
Yeah.
When the detail, because once it goes to the detail and design stages, that's when a lot of stuff will be uncovered. People don't know.
Let's see what happens, I suppose.
So it's just a bit of a wait and see game at the moment. I've got a question for you, Peter, regarding the rates and infrastructure and growth funding in there, and the topic around fast track infrastructure cost recovery. Amendments would enable councils to recover growth-related capital expenditure associated with fast track development. So up until this point, is the likes of your Queenstowns and Aucklands and that they had to actually front foot and pay. They're making a statement here. So now is it the developers will actually have to pay the councils?
My understanding is different councils have approached it differently. For instance, Invercargill has not been charging for some, requiring contributions for some things, but other councils do. Going forward, I think what this is intended to do is make it clearer that who has to pay for what, and firm it up from 2029. But an interim measure has been brought into the Act to do things sooner than that. So, Steve, do you have anything to add there?
Well, through your worship, I just know that there was always weakness associated with fast track approvals where they hadn't, where the infrastructure wasn't in. I think we've seen headlines around that. Various councils have been saying, approvals have been given, but infrastructure is yet to be built. Who's paying for it, and how's that to work? And in the past, that's where financial contributions or development contributions had assisted, or the other caveats used to be, well, you couldn't have development until or unless the developer put the infrastructure in the ground. And so I think that's all this is just making sure, which is what we always knew, was that little issue around, people can want growth in any places they want. They can develop anything they want to develop, but at the end of the day, someone has to get pipes and roads to it, and someone then has to pay for it. And I think it's trying to address that disconnect.
Have we got any examples in the Clutha district where someone's wanted to expand and develop and it's fallen back on the council? Like, have you experienced that?
Well, Milton, that residential development, Milton's an example. And timing associated with that. Milburn will be an example.
Yeah.
As we're working our way through the industrial when that comes on.
And how we've dealt with the Milton subdivision, for example, is councils invested in the pipes and they have to pay a higher financial contribution as they connect. But we've still had to fund some of that investment to enable the pipeline to go where it needs to go for future growth.
Yeah.
But Melbourne's whole another level again, where we need some agreements with the developer. So whatever investment we make is agreed how that's going to be paid for.
So it's actually long-term cost recovery.
It is, but potentially because of the scale of the Melbourne development, there may be. And when it gets really big, we would have a specific development agreement with the developer. We have an agreement that we entered into 15 years ago for servicing the Otago Corrections Facility. That's a specific agreement with them. Right. And because of the scale of the Melbourne development, we would see having a similar agreement with them for that. It is a little bit more complicated with the change to Southern Waters as well, because most of that's actually going to be with Southern Waters, a little bit with us, but in terms of the wastewater and water servicing and those sorts of things, it's going to be transferring away from us within the next 12 months.
Right. Bit of work behind the scenes that people don't see. Any further questions for Peter, team?
Your worship, like in the past, high growth councils, and if you have growth like this, and Melbourne would be an example of that. It used to be that councils would front foot the expenditure, but their debt caps suddenly come into play, didn't they? Because they were through development, which they would recover, but only over time. That's still debt that was taken on by councils, and that rapidly blew out their debt caps and reduced their ability to do a lot of other things purely from the development. That was one of the big risks associated with that. And that's why there was all the issues around, okay, developers have to start front footing some of these things. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody wants to potentially front foot the debt cash sort of position if they can help it, because they don't get money until they sell sections.
That's right.
We always see that side of it. Like councils used to be the banker, but councils rapidly run out of headroom in that space when growth continued and continued. And of course, we've got our own debt headroom issues. So, we would really struggle to be able to take on forward debt. Like Melbourne, for example, would be something really that's got to be sitting with the developer, and as Joel said, that's why it's a developer agreement relationship. But the issue that at hand with the thing was that these fast track consents were cutting through red tape to get developments moving. But there's always, what was the red tape? A lot of it was about, apart from issues associated with can something happen, a lot of it from the council was always about, the affordability of the infrastructure. When can it be put in the ground? Who's paying for it up front, and how's it going to be funded? That has always really been one of the biggest problems. That wasn't fixed by fast track.
Solve one and create another problem. No further questions, team? No, thank you for that. Peter? Session number 2. Now we've got
Team doing this.
team, Sharon's not well, she's at home proper, so Jules and Steve are going to present to this one.
And Trey is back up. So normally what will happen is Sharon will be watching from home and she'll email me if we can something right. So maybe some injections that come in, interjections as we go. All right, so we'll just run through the slides. Just to clarify, the person that was trying to join before is actually for the transportation section later on. They just weren't quite sure of the timing, so we'll just leave that hanging until we get to the transportation section, and then we'll have a couple of people joining there. As you can see from the presentation, you have the slides in front of you. We're going to work through the information that Sharon's prepared, and we're assuming you've all had a good look at it at home. There is some additional information as well, which we've tabled this morning. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to read that, but it really highlights, I suppose, the nature of these rates examples that we're showing you. While I would call them rather preliminary, there's a lot of things that need to change that will go through the process that will mean whatever happens at the other end will be significantly different to what these are looking like at this stage. We've got to review our overheads model. We haven't, the annual report and the starting positions and the final loans haven't been finalised. And also we're working through and this has been flagged by Eric Barnes, he may talk about it later on, but with the changes in Three Waters, lots of councils are going to be rediscussing with the NZTA what overheads should be claimed back through transportation versus through other activities. So that's a significant area that we need to work through as well. And until all of those things are finalised, and as roading is becoming a much bigger proportion of what we're going to be doing once we lose Three Waters, changes in that area can have a significant impact on the rates. So that's why I would call these a preliminary indication at this stage. And as we get through that process, we'll be able to refine that and have more information for you. And that's particularly important when we're thinking about the transportation program later on with Donna and the rest of that team, is that we do have options to refine that program in the future once we have a clearer picture of that overall rating and you've made some decisions on the overhead model. And we're suggesting you can go down a path which can then be adjusted later on because the NZTA budgets are not finalised until September next year, but the team has to submit basically in a week, isn't it, Donna?
Yeah, 26th of August.
Yep. What we might do as well is we haven't actually distributed our microphones, so we'll take one down the back.
That's all right.
And you can, yeah. So we will now whip through the slides. So as has been discussed and is on the slide, are there any questions on that before we jump into working through the information? And we can revisit the additional information at the end. I just wanted to touch on that before we start, so you've got that as a background when we're working through the examples.
Yeah, we'll talk about the actual examples
When we get to them.
when we get to the
Yep.
in the debate.
So at a really high level, and I'll just keep an eye out for emails from Sharon. It's basically been rolled forward in terms of what we had in the LTP. All Three Waters costs and rating has been removed, and the residual costs, well, before we've done any work about looking at what level those costs are, has just been reallocated using our existing overhead allocation model. So that's when we said there's lots of things that are going to change. That's going to be one of them that's going to change as well. And it's to just give, I suppose, a bit of visibility of if we did reallocate our overheads the way we currently do it now, that's what it would make a change in terms of those rates examples. I think we'll get to it when we get to the examples, but roading is a big chunk of that, which we've already talked about. And rural typically pick up a big chunk of our roading rates because most of our roads are in the rural area as well. So about 85 to 90% of our rates roading rates go through rural, and that's when we've been holding our roading rates in the past. That hasn't actually changed much, but now when there's extra costs that are going into roading, that affects the rural more than it affects the urban.
So just a question there, Jules. When we talk about roading, so all the runoff and everything that goes to side to the roads, the drains, the rest of it, what pile does that come into? Does that still come under roading or does it go into the water side?
So there's really clear guidelines from NZTA about where the roading infrastructure stops and where the stormwater infrastructure starts. So even with the change, that's always been an issue within council, and council's roading team's always responsible for sumps, the connection from sumps into a drain or into a stormwater system, or a culvert that just basically lets the water get from one side of the road to the other. Everything else in terms of the stormwater system that gets that away and conveys it through the town is a stormwater cost that'll be going with Three Waters. Other than the little bit of grey area where it's a river or a natural water course, usually there's we end up having a debate with the ORC about where that sits. Usually the ORC says in an urban area we're leaving it to council. Outside the urban area, then the ORC usually deals with those sorts of things. But that can be a grey area. Donna, did you want to comment on that? You're waving.
So are the lines going to be more?
Well, they're pretty clear now. Like in our GIS system, for example, we identify which assets are transportation assets and that's based on those NZTA rules, and we identify which assets are stormwater assets. So we've got it reasonably clear now because we have to, because NZTA won't fund things outside dealing with that runoff on the road.
No, Jules, you've pretty much covered it, to be fair. In our preferred option later on today, though, one of the areas we are looking for additional budgets in is in the water tabling, drainage maintenance.
Yeah, so that's water tables on the side of rural roads and those sorts of things. It's not curb and won't necessarily be curb and channel and those sorts of things in urban areas. Right, if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so as I suppose this is just a clear definition of what the rates examples are showing. The Sharon's documented there. Yeah, so 26, 27, we're not, I mean, that's the current year, so we do still have the 3 waters activities. 27, 28, we've reallocated it, and that is the current starting point. And as we've already stressed, these are preliminary figures to try and give you an indication, but they're very preliminary at this stage.
Yeah, we're generally looking at the number 3 column.
Yeah.
That's what we're already working with.
I suppose the number 2 column is if you decide a different way of funding those residual costs rather than rolling them through our existing activities, then there would be another chunk that would have to be added to that, which would be whatever that rating is for those costs. But it's not included at the moment, so we're not actually funding all of the costs we have under that option 2 model. Ready? Thanks, Pete. Oh, Simon, question.
Yeah, the rates examples do highlight a couple of pretty key things, particularly on the rural and the lifestyle side. They have the largest predicted increases, so that probably won't be so relevant for those with water, but it really highlights the effect of taking out southern water, taking out our water assets on those who don't use council water. You've got places there that are potentially looking at a 20% rates increase that never had water because the council's removed the water services. And that was something that we tried to highlight last year, but went nowhere. And I think that's going to be particularly, probably will be quite galling for a lot of those ratepayers. And I can't see any way that we can make much of a shift. It's not so bad like for the big water users because our percentage, a big chunk of our bill is water.
But we do know about 50% of our rural community don't have water as well.
Yes.
Some work.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a stinger there. And the other one is that we have talked about it, the planning and regulatory, how we do that. Obviously, a lot of, particularly for the rural, as a lot of that's based on there's a capital value rate. I guess that's what we're going to discuss with those stranded overheads and where they fit. That is something that is going to be, but there was quite a dramatic shift in the rating, especially for the rural. They are providing a fair bit of those stranded overheads.
Yeah, well, I definitely see the effect through the transportation in terms of how that works. But
I'm not so much the rating. I understand the rating. It's where the regulatory, a lot of the overheads sit in there and then are distributed on a capital value rating.
And we've seen the figures. I mean, we've known for the last 3 or 4, 5 years how the urbans have had the rating shock, right?
I don't know. All water users have had the rating shock.
Yes, but we know, yes, but the base rates, the base rates for the rural haven't gone up either, right? And we say the water is this.
Well, I suppose it highlights, I suppose it makes even more important that other work about how we do allocate our own funds and making sure we're comfortable with it and fair. I suppose the other thing it highlights too is that there is a quantum to allocate, and that's where some of those level of service discussions come in about if we want to actually move that quantum, then there's other things that we have to look at.
If it was equally balanced, then you'd find an equal, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but if it was equally balanced, you would expect that there would be an equal balance to the changes as a result of the removal of the water side of it. Right? So you wouldn't see this, but it's clearly not how it's structured. It's not equally balanced because there's an unequal, the urbans have reduced by significantly more. We talked about we were losing 51% of the revenue for water, and we don't expect to be losing 51% of the cost. But if you look at the urbans, they're way up there, and so it tells us that's not balanced in terms of how the distribution is for how the rates are allocated, right?
Yeah. What I was meaning about the rule, like in my case, that like you're sitting there looking, say, 16 to 20-something%, but it's not really going to be like that because 3/4 of our rates bill is paying for Balmoral to Tupeka water, so the actual impact's probably just 4 or 5%, depending on what they do. But it's water users that have borne the brunt, not just urban. Anyone on a rural water scheme has had a dramatic increase in their total bill.
Yeah, the difference is we haven't shown those.
No, we can't. We can't because we're all different.
Changes all over the place.
Yeah, but it's water users, not just, I don't want to see it.
Just urban. Yeah.
Or just saying it's urban. It's all, anyone who's used council water services has a massive hit to their rates in the last year.
Thank you. Do you want to go to the next slide, Pete, please? So just in terms of the process that is going to be continuing, obviously there's budget holder reviews, looking at actual costs, and you've already seen some of that come back through the work in the last workshop that Mike was doing in the community services area. There's a finance cost review. What are our actual costs? What is our loan rates going forward? All those sorts of things.
A big overhead review.
Yep, the overhead review, which we've discussed at the last workshop as well, and bit of I suppose, a mixed bag of how much detail the council wants to get into there. We've got as mentioned in that addendum, we're working through some roading budget deficit issues that we will come back to you once we've got some more information. And then there's those assumptions: inflation, interest rates, depreciation or alternative funding of depreciation, which we touched on last time, and Donna's team will again recap in the transportation presentation later on. And those, like while you've given some direction on those, as this all comes together, you'll be making some decisions on those things moving forward.
And then just that last little bit, paper after this around the level service reviews. Of course, things get informed by whatever approach we take and decisions we take on level service.
Next one, Pete. And obviously important, which we already had some feedback in the last one, one of the previous meetings. Why are these capital projects still in the list? So that's part of a review as well. If they don't need to be there, that's great. But if there's other ones you want added in, then we need to know about those as well. And we've already touched on the overhead allocation review. And we are already working on that question that was raised in the last meeting about what actually is able to be delivered this year, because that'll affect our starting position for next year as well. And what we're also asking Three Waters to crack on with, or Southern Waters to crack on with when they start in 10 months, just over 10 months' time. Next one, Pete. So direction already provided. I suppose it's just to confirm what you've already confirmed, which public conveniences looking to move to 100% UAGC funding, which is what we used to have. You know, discussed it before. The only reason we moved to a capital value rate is because we hit our 30% cap. Museums, so we're going to retain the current UAGC funding approach. Roading, leave the current approach for now. And that, again, you might, once you see the actual, it's going to be too late once you see the outcome of that and we're drafting the LTP to do a significant roading rating review. You could tweak it around the edges, but it would be, we wouldn't have time to go and say we need to completely overhaul how we rate for our roads. And then there's the modelling options, which are noted there that you've already decided on before. district-wide community services and 50/50 options. Footpaths, that's for new footpaths. And then regulatory, which has already been touched on by Councillor McAtamney. Could that go against the UAGC or not? Again, that'll affect where we sit in terms of our 30% rates cap, potentially quite significantly. But the debate could be, are there other things that should be funded through that rather than the planning and regulatory? And I suppose the key part of this slide is there anything, we're just recapping what you've already decided. Is there anything there, we just wanted to make sure that everyone's in agreement, that's where we're heading down in terms of those areas.
Well, just to comment on the UAGC, we've already, we're allowed that leeway for 5 years, and if you look at the urban, it's already out towards 40% anyway, so we've blown through that straight away.
Well, maybe they'll change the legislation, because Three Waters was always a chunk of things that was taken out of the cap. So maybe when councils are looking at it going, well, we're struggling to get back to within the 30%, I don't know, not sure if that's going to be revisited or if we have to be transitioning back to the 30%, but that'll be, when we present the rates information, we'll give you that little projecting forward through the LTP as well.
I would suggest that it would have to, I think.
Well, yeah, if you look at, it's nearly 50%.
Yeah.
For some of those, it's over 50% for some of those urban ones. Well, it varies, but it's probably over 40%, so we're miles away. So ginormous
We'll have to change.
rating and a review or impact to try and swing that back. Just it's impossible.
Well, I suppose given the 5-year time frame, there's a bit of the question about, do you have to transition to that over that period, or is there going to be potentially other reform that overtakes the process?
Would it be fair to say that, though, with water taking out, that the UAGC component probably could go to 60%?
Don't know, they'd have to change the legislation.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. But that would be on par, you would think, or my...
Could well be.
Yeah.
It's just the unknown at this
Yeah.
stage.
Of course.
Any other comment on that one, or we'll keep moving along?
Everyone happy with the modelling options to develop? Nothing been missed?
Yeah, next one, Pete. So this is, I suppose, what is preliminary. So as we've already mentioned, the figures are an initial starting point, and we've already said there's lots of things to review that are going to change those numbers. Residual overheads, we've already talked about the allocation, and there's some other detail we need to bring back to you in terms of those other ones. So I suppose this is just reiterating, this is initial, and what we would probably stress is when you're thinking about your level of service decisions later on, it's about making sure that we keep our options open when we get to that stage. And there's potential, especially for the transportation, with NZTA, it'll be much easier to pull it back a wee bit later on than try to increase those budgets from what we initially indicated.
And just remind me, I'm pretty sure this is just a starting position, right? So this isn't actually the budget that we've done work on to produce a budget.
Yeah.
It's just pulling it together as a starting position.
It's LTP
Jules
numbers,
or
yeah.
Trey, is that included like any percentage increase from this current year or anything like that? Was that built into the starting position? What does that look like?
There'll be inflation added to current year budget that we're looking at for next year. That would be the main general increase we would see in the starting position.
That would have just been whatever bill percentages we had.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be, I don't know, something around 2% or whatever bill was at the time.
Not a budget review, it's the system doing its thing.
But what you were asking for was, what does life look like with Three Waters out? What's the position, so that you've got some indicator of what you're working with as we're starting to build a budget as a result. So you can see where things sit, you can see where the rubs are, what we need to focus on and look at. As Councillor McAtamney says, where we sit around rural, because you can see where the big impacts are on rural at the moment. If you look at the urban side, those significant decreases, they will come back in some way with budgets, depending on what we do with it. But it shows where that's sitting. It'll come back. The question is, what happens with rural? It's already baseline increasing. What options are there to bring it back, or will it also increase as a result of budgets that are coming through? And that we know biggest contributor to budgets and the increases in rural is transportation, right? So we're heading on that side of things. It will be interesting when the work's being done on the overhead model, in terms of how that is to work. I mean, when you do the overhead model, it is supposed to be based on some logic or rationale of the principle of allocating internal costs to external activities. It's not supposed to be, hey, we need to do this and we need to reduce that and we need to reduce that. You really do need to have a justifiable reason for doing so. So you don't have complete flexibility to go, hey, we need to sort of rebalance this for urban versus rural or whatever. In that sense, you do have to be aware of the mechanics of it and the logic to it in making those calls. But I'm sure it'll be in your minds, and we'll also be showing impacts of various models that present and scenarios that are presented. But the important thing is you have in front of you that first sort of idea of what life looks like and where things move as a consequence of that, which is what you were asking for.
Next one, Pete. So what we need from the workshop, it's really just to note the proposed starting position. There's a whole range of reasons why we've said it's just really an indicative prelim information for you. So you've got that in the back of your mind, as Steve's just mentioned. Getting some feedback from you guys as to how useful that is. And if we need to explain or work through any more areas, it'd be good to get that direction back from you for that. And then, as has already been touched on, we've identified the rating review areas. We have to get onto that work relatively quickly because that can't happen as we're trying to draft our LCP. So we can bring that back to you once those budgets, when you're starting to get the budgets nailed down, you can say, well, actually, how does a change in rating in this area affect that? And again, as Steve's already mentioned too, it's going to be dovetailed in with those level of service reviews, because that potentially is going to change what you're looking to rate in certain areas if you make some changes to levels of service. Okay, next one, Pete. So probably what we'll do is jump back one, and if we want to have a look through the rates examples, was there any, like Councillor McAtammy's already touched on some of the key differences between urban, lifestyle, and obviously we aren't showing rural examples with water because it depends on which scheme they're on and how many units they buy and all those sorts of things. Would it be useful if we pick 2 or 3 examples that do have water units on different schemes and show those as well, so you've got that in mind versus that urban example? Like, is that actually going to be useful, or as long as we're all aware, this excludes all of those water costs?
Well, what it will highlight is those rural without water. It'll really highlight that.
Yeah.
Like I've sort of already worked it out. We're probably only looking at 5-6%.
Yeah. I suppose this is information to help you guys understand the changes, and also when we're talking to the community. So I suppose that's the question. Would that be beneficial to have 2 or 3 more examples?
I think so.
Sharon's probably going to be accusing me. But
Yeah, well, I was going to say how much work's involved in that.
not a heck of a lot. It's just adding the water units in
So these are samples or whatever.
Yeah, there's probably some of these examples that do have water.
Yeah, but isn't Councillor McAtammy pointing out that the ones with water and because it's a high proportion of the cost and that side of things, that it's not as extreme. Those ones.
I just feel sorry for all the people that in the wee towns, the Torrey Mouse, etc., that have never had council water services and they face a dramatic increase because council has removed the services into another entity. This is what's happened, so, yeah.
Well, but through you, Your Worship, there are ways that you can potentially change that.
Yeah.
And that is if you decide to fund those residual costs in another way. They would still have an increase, but when you look at that, you could say, we're going to choose a funding mechanism that's not going to make that as bad.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's what we're trying to get from you now is, if you're concerned about that issue, is that something you want us to look at? Because at the moment, we weren't planning a different funding rating mechanism for residual costs. But I suppose the way it's been presented, Sharon's presented in a way that you can look at that because it's effectively the second from the right column, but there would be another rates element to that to fund those residual costs.
I think it would be worth a look because it is, to me, it seems very unfair to those ratepayers.
But what are you proposing that is fair?
Well, as Jules has said, there are other ways we can tinker around with how we allocate some of those costs or who pays. I may have just put my own rates up.
Oh, look, and that, I suppose, part of the exercise would be if the intention is to try and lessen the impact on those who didn't have water, then that, I'm sure we could discuss that with the finance team about how we could do that. But what that would mean is that those who did have water and are losing it, who've had big increases, are going to potentially have even bigger increases again.
That's right.
I know.
So it's a double-edged sword. But what we don't want to do is get to February or March and you go, oh, we wish we'd looked at this rating option. That's the whole point of this workshop, is to know if that's important to you, that we get that information and can look at options.
Because we are talking about quite a few thousand ratepayers, aren't we?
I think when we were originally looking at the water funding stuff, about half of our rural ratepayers weren't connected to a water scheme in terms of properties. So there will be several thousand ratepayers.
Plus there's those wee places like Punawea is another one, isn't it? Torremouth, several.
Yeah, they both have stormwater rating.
Yeah.
They don't have, then they have, Punawea has some sewage connections there as well, but not as an entire scheme. Torremouth only has stormwater. But yeah, those little communities were part of that. About half of our ratepayers aren't connected to water. We didn't separate those ones. If they're classed as rural, we didn't separate them out. From memory, that was about the split.
How would that affect what we're talking about? How would that affect places like Clinton and Lawrence that have been fed from rural schemes?
Oh, well, at the end of the day, what we're looking at is there a way to reduce the impact on those who are never connected to those schemes, to a water scheme? I'm not sure if we can come up with a way to do that, but they would be falling into the category of they've been connected to a water supply. So at the moment, they would be getting that dramatic reduction that we've seen. But I'm not sure if we can come up with a way to do that. But I suppose if that's an important thing you want, we can look at some options to see if that would reduce that impact on those who were never connected.
Plus, we could do the homework to actually determine the population size and things like that. So
Number of
at the moment, we don't know, do we? We're just surmising. But what we can pick from what you were saying is we can do the homework and investigate the actual position. What were their rates like over time? How many people are we talking about in that position? What will be impacted if we do nothing? And at least we can pull it together, and you'll have some information. These things aren't about making decisions, right? It's about pulling it together so that you can then feed it in if we need to. So we can certainly do that, right?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not 100% convinced we can come up with a way that will isolate that out.
Yeah.
I can't, because we're not going to be rating for water or anything in the future. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do it. But
we don't have to find solutions now. We can understand the issue and understand who's impacted by it.
I appreciate,
That's important.
but I appreciate that it is very, very tricky.
If we can do it.
Any other sort of comments around, was it a surprise to people around, like particularly Councillor Frost, how big a drop as a starting point anyway, at least the urbans would be.
Actually, it's not the starting point, it's about where I would hope it would be if we're losing 51% of our income. So, those people in towns like Stirling and Milton, Dalkeitha, are looking at about a 50% reduction in their rates, which, you know, is a cool, which is what I would have hoped for. And so, yeah, as a starting point, I think that's quite reasonable.
I think the caution, of course, was the problem that we identified and we were worried about was that just across the board that we might lose 51% in revenue, but we weren't losing 51% in costs. So where that played, and as we can see, how it's sort of playing out is actually we're getting that 50% in the urbans, but you're getting an increase in that rural side of it. So,
I mean, most, maybe I'm speaking for myself, from the roading side of it, you know, I live in a rural area and I expect to have to pay my share of roading, to have access to roading and, you know, get your tankers and trucks. And so, yeah, I was expecting that to a degree. I mean, there'll be people out there that'll be grumpy and say, oh, yeah, it's gone up too much, but it's just the reality of the situation. Well, I think it is. So, no, look, I was actually reasonably happy with those figures.
then it would be great if we could keep to it, but we'll see as you start for budgets. But at least you know what you're working with, and maybe even aspire to try and achieve.
Yeah, I just did a quick calculation before on that. You're mentioning the big impact on the roading, but it's not actually that. It works out at 14% higher roading, a higher roading rate for the rural. The actual planning and regulatory is 40% higher. So significantly more. I'm not the roading, as Councillor Frost said, I'm not too problematic.
Maybe we should be looking at our fees and charges and recovering more through fees and charges. Like that's part of that rating review is what's the split between your fees and charges and your rates.
But that's why we've got the info, isn't it? So we can start pulling the pieces together and figuring out the impacts and the consequences of the various bits of the parts.
Yeah. So, I mean, the regulatory thing goes up after the reallocation under the current reallocation process. So that's actually something you're looking at, isn't it?
Yep. That's part of that overhead allocation.
Overhead allocation.
I think a big part of that too is going to be making sure you understand where those costs are coming from too, because some of those costs can't be like the scale, potentially the scale of our ERP system for managing council doesn't change when we lose 3 waters. We're still going to fund that over what's left. That's the residual cost component.
Your Worship, just probably a comment from me. It's probably a wee relief to me that the urban ones are more on par with the water going out within reason. And yeah, the rural is what it is, and probably not unexpected. As we know, there's tinkering to happen, but I think it's, yeah, I'm happy for it to be a starting point.
The clear standout before the residual at Clinton at 58%, it's 58.6. It's pretty impressive, isn't it? But, we've also got to be mindful too, though, that there's still going to be another bill for water.
But this is just about more than compensates, doesn't it?
We haven't seen that bill yet.
Just
It's got to be cheaper. And it's got to be cheaper, Roger. You've got to
just about.
But you know, it's great. It's just a shame Councillor Catterwood isn't here to see this with us. But yeah, we've got a starting point, and there's a bit of massaging to be done yet. So it's quite good that we're onto this early, and we're going early on it. So it's good. Any more questions? Brendan.
All good, thanks.
All good.
We'll pick up some of that stuff in the additional information in the transportation one, Jules, because I think that's the other part of it is we just needed to be aware of the risks that we've identified in the additional information, but as it will carry over into the NZTA discussion on the program funding. So we got it early, so you've got that info, and that can be highlight it again when we're talking about it with the roading decisions, transportation and funding decisions. We'll deal with that. Yeah, so that'll be fine.
So the key question is, what additional information would help council make informed choices as the long-term budget is defined? So no other additional information you want from the staff?
I think we should think of it in conjunction also with the next session, which is around the reviews and that, of course, so those will pick up some things. But we have noted the request for the investigative work on the rural non-water people. And we'll have a look at that side of things.
Right. No more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Right. Budget reviews go. This has been presented by Steve and Peter.
Well, Peter took the report and worked some magic and crafted some slides out of it. Your worship. Are you speaking to it, Peter, or am I doing it?
Or is he confused?
Do you mind when I open and I can come in it, or vice versa?
Sure. You and talk about budget review.
Yeah, do that. This paper, or the paper in the agenda, and the slides that we'll be seeing, is really just pulling together discussions we've had with His Worship and with elected members around. What type of reviews do you expect as elected members in developing the budget? The report highlights, I think, some of the questions and expectations that have been put upon you by the residents and ratepayers out there, and certainly the feedback we received through the annual plan process. I think we highlighted there, didn't we, that as elected members, you did do some work on interrogating the budgets line by line to an extent. You worked through the capital program, you looked at other things, you had the structure and all this side of it. You had an ability to look at some of that, and some changes were made, but budgets went out at really high amounts, which we knew wasn't something that's going to be accepted by people, and this is where we've got to. But I think the point that's come out from that is that we never really gave the residents and ratepayers any real ability to advise us, give us their suggestions for levels of service changes, budget reviews, and we know that the consultation process, don't we? It doesn't lend itself to. The submission process isn't brilliant for allowing you to make real level of service change decisions on things. You really need to be looking at that, when you're going out for consultation, as opposed to decisions after consultation. It's really difficult to do that. So this is what we've come up with around relative. There's various options. There was the area for ceasing some services. So we thought you could make decisions, or you could indicate preferences to inquire what the community felt about ceasing some services and the consequences for that. I think you would expect some form of cost reduction, and that's where just pulled it out, a 25% reduction. What might that look like? And for us to do some homework on that and the consequences for that. And of course, the usual zero-based budget, where we take the what we've just talked about, the start point. So you've got an idea of that, but then we have to build the budgets up and and present something to you, that's the normal way we would do things. So we would still need to be doing that. And I think what we're looking for, just try to keep up with well, I won't jump. We'll keep with what the detail in here. So if we go to the next one, Peter. So now we're being specific about service cessations. Now, I have advised staff already. I had an all-staff memo. I had an all-staff meeting, and I said to staff that because there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going on and things like that out there. And so, it was necessary and essential to speak to uncertainty and have, so that I could give direction and provide the vision for the year, what we were trying to do, and how to work with uncertainty, because the whole organisation is working in that. And so I talked to them about the uncertainty of the simplifying local government side of things. It's not uncertainty about the transition to 3 waters. We know that's happening. We're planning on working on that, and we'll be informing people as we go of what's happening with that side of things. So there's certainty to that. That's happening. The uncertainty is around what's happening with the Head Start proposal. What does that mean? What does it mean for the organisation, the council? What does it mean? Is it a 2028 issue? Is it a 2031 issue? That's uncertain. Staff are naturally worried. They're looking at themselves and saying, should they be looking for other jobs and things like that? And my goodness, I don't want to lose them as a consequence of uncertainty. We've got lots and lots we're doing for the district. So I had to deal with that. But there was a different area of uncertainty that I did discuss with them at the meeting. And the uncertainty, I said, is going to arise from the LTP, because the elected members and the residents and ratepayers will expect us to be looking at levels of service. What does that mean for the activities that we currently resource? And that might impact on jobs and things like that. And we are going to have to deal with that. And I discussed with them about that side of things. So the issue around, the potential to exit from some services, I have explained that to people and said, a lot of water under the bridge to go before any decisions are made. These are all exploratory. And yes, it's uncertainty at certain times, but there are ways in which we can manage and deal with that side of it. So I have pre-warned the organisation, so be comfortable about that. I would probably only say to you nothing that I've written and nothing I'd like you necessarily to discuss if we're going down these pathways is to name any individual people. We don't want staff to be named in these sort of discussions. Just keep the discussion to things like that. That would be appreciated. But I have pre-warned the organisation that these are discussions we're going to have. So service cessation, I picked out the things that I thought were potentially fully discretionary in that sense. I have highlighted in some things that I didn't think would be on the list. For example, the Milton Pool, simply because of the fixed costs associated with that side of it. Now, you might disagree, and we can put more on the list, but that would be a reason why I didn't include that, because if you're paying for the loans and you're paying for all these things, you're going to pay for it anyway, even if you end up closing the service. So this was purely exit from a service. And if you've got other thoughts around other services that you think we could exit, then that's what we want to know, because we can look at that. Further on in the paper and in this slides, we explain how we think we would go about this. So don't worry about that yet. We'll come to that. This is purely just an example, an explanation of this. So any discussion on that? Any other suggestions? Any questions about that?
Just all grants. What do you exactly?
It's everything.
So are we talking stuff out of the, say, a non-council gets a grant every year?
Yeah, so,
Put it in that list.
yeah, but what we would be doing, like, we're not necessarily saying that you would agree and want to exit 100% out of grants. But we do need to present, let's say, what does exiting out of grants, what might it mean, so that you might come back from it or whatever you do. So it is the worst case scenario, explaining what that means.
You might review all that grants.
Yeah, so it'll be like, well, at the moment, you know, how much do we spend on it? I don't know. Let's just throw a figure. Let's say if it was $250,000 or something like that. You know, you'd say, well, we could save $250,000 by not giving any community grants out.
I think that bottom point's the key part of it, is what are the consequences if you did that?
Yeah.
You can pull back from it.
Okay. I thought I was wondering whether you're lumping them all in or whether it was a review.
But I also think the communities out there don't realise how much goes out of council for grants.
Yeah.
But they actually add it up in their community, what got a grant.
Yes,
And how would they, like you said, how would they be able to, you know, carry on if they didn't have it?
yeah, and what it does mean that we would provide that info. You know, like we would say, well, how much are we spending on grants in total? We haven't necessarily seen that ourselves, so it does mean that we pull that sort of information together in a lump sum, don't we? Go, well, there you go. That's actually quite a bit of dollars or whatever.
Just while we're on that topic of grants, so and a lot of our grants are funded out of the surplus from the investment fund. What about the contribution that we're taking out of our surpluses from the investment fund that are actually going towards rate smoothing that's been happening in the past? Where's that going to sit in this picture? You know, was it $800,000 annually you used to give across to? So with this change now, do we still need to be doing that $800,000?
Your worship, I think it's a valid point. I mean, I think it's something we would say, hey, this is an optional decision. We would feed it into the machinery. You know, you've seen the starting position. What would it mean like if we pulled $800,000 out? It might actually mean not a lot, but it would mean that your investment income goes up as a result and gets available for things. So,
well, effectively, that 800,000 should be coming from the investment fund. Now, this is only my view, my opinion. Should be part of that grant that goes back to the community.
And these are all solutions that we can look at, your worship, now that we know what we're talking about. But what we would be saying is that we would be producing something that sort of says what's the output of the grants. We do know that grants are funded from some different sources and things, and we would say, you know, X amount funded from this and Y amount funded from that. But we're basically just sort of highlighting that that's an area of discretion, isn't it? And we can put it out there.
Yeah, like that $800,000 harmonising or smoothing it. It's a pretty bad smoking habit, really, that the council has adopted over the years, isn't it? So quite good to kick out habit.
Yeah, although we'll blow the UAG seat a bit together.
Well, we've got to get to the UAG yet too. UAGC. So. No, just my view.
And it'll be interesting. I mean, if you go down that pathway of wanting to present options that do include exit, you know, if we take the community development area, that a lot of that area, whole area, is discretionary, right? It's the stuff we do within the community that we definitely believe is valued, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out as a result. Right? So that's the thing. And obviously we haven't touched the statutory stuff we have to do and the things that get us into trouble. Yeah. So it's not a suggestion of all activity. It's just a limited selection of activity. We could do the next thing, Peter. So then the other one is just a figure we pulled out, 25%. I mean, a 20% cost reduction is pretty significant in that sense. So again, it's probably a similar principle to the exit out of some services. It's a reasonably extreme figure, but it's a good start point for people to look at what are the consequences of that. I am expecting the group managers to be working through where that sits. It is also true that some departments, the percentage of council costs for some departments is really a small proportion compared to some other departments. Whereas our major costs going, it's going to be in Donna's area with the infrastructure still that's remaining, the transportation and the green space and waste, right? So, if they made 25% reduction in that space, it would be basically everything would be a major difference compared to some of the other minor departments in terms of what they spend in that. So we just need to look at it from different perspectives as well. But the point is that similar to exit strategy, it would be around identifying the consequences of changes in level of service to things, and that.
So the other key component there is how to identifying that and then actually communicating that to our communities, that as a consequence, this is what you'll be dealing with.
Yes, but we'll talk about that, Your Worship, and subsequent things. So if you think that's really important, we'll deal with that. What's important to me is that, that we're doing it, if we do it this way up front, I much prefer that than some councils make a decision at an annual plan and say, we approve the budget, but you need to CE make it as 25% reduction, and that's what we're approving. And I think if you find there's a particular council that's had that put on them just in this annual plan, so they're banking on a reduction that there's no solution yet identified for, right? But they're built in that there's a reduction. So in my view, it's always better to have a planned approach to that, and you're communicating with your communities on what that will be, because the alternative is, I end up making these sort of reductions and level of service changes without discussing it with anybody, consulting with your community or what it means. So doing it this way, we were going to ultimately talk to the community about it. I think it's important, and we do need to get across, don't we? And we need to ask people to contribute to the discussions around, the balance and the trade-offs. And you've had to make the decision as elected members about balance and trade-offs. And we've really only had submission processes. So this idea that we're trying to push with CLTP would be different, saying, well, let's at least hear from the community on their view of the trade-offs, and give it to all parts of the community, not just those that are looking for a cost reduction, for example.
It's two sides.
Yeah.
Oh, most certainly, yeah. And we couldn't be any more transparent.
Do we stop mowing berms everywhere in the district?
Yeah.
No,
Mow them
that's
once a
right.
year.
Which is, we made a reduction in that level of service maybe 15, 20 years ago, and we're on fair go, but I'm sure that
But I think you're right, Rod, you got your computer here. But we're giving the communities a choice. And we can't do much more than that.
Well, through US Bank, it's actually about giving them information. This gives residents information, then they can go away and they've actually got some real information, not just bullshit they're hearing at the pub or, down the corner where somebody's making up stories. They can look at some of this information and make an informed decision, whether they fill out the survey or whatever. So they've actually got them much better informed, and I think it will actually give them a far clearer indication of what council does. So they'll feel more involved in the whole process. And some of them still aren't going to be happy at the end of the day because we're not going to do what they want, but at least they've been involved. And it gives them real information to make some choices on. People might be frightened what dog control actually costs if you lump everything of the cost of dogs onto licenses or whatever. Some people are going to get a bit of a surprise about what some things cost. So I think it's a very good idea, Steve.
And the other thing is just, let's say the regulatory activities, fee generating activities, we did say the 25% cost savings can include scenarios where they might have to increase fees. But again, with the consequences on that, they have to balance them. So, all right, so anything else about that? again, that's just been picked out as a figure. It can always come back, or it could always increase in some parts and that, but I think 25% construction is a good chunk to say, hey, there'll be some trade-offs here, but you get to see an idea, and 25% is a good chunk of production. So the next one, Peter, is just
Oh, my mate.
so this is still what we would be doing anyway. We need to rebuild that budget. Without the three waters, we need to be looking at the activities and just producing that anyway. What is it that people think that they need to be doing under current sort of circumstances? And it's a good comparator to the issues around the exits and the 25% reduction. So that's what we would be normally doing regardless. Probably the only what we'd be normally doing anyway without anything. So that's just something that we need to get on with too. Anything about that?
Nothing about that.
Right. So then we get into the interesting, well, there's some more interest in this side of things, is that this, by suggesting we'll be doing, we need to do the homework and put out there to the community about exiting some services, about what the consequences or reductions going to be and that sort of thing. Then how do we go about that? How does that fit into the normal sequence for the LTP, which isn't designed to be particularly helpful in that space? The consultation document that we need to use is it's an audited document, and you don't have a lot of flexibility around what we are wanting to do. And with the range of things we want to do here, we really need to be looking outside that and also earlier than that process. So this is what we're all looking at. We're picking up the target engagement before the LTP, so that's before Christmas. So the next one, Peter. So we're looking then at really hitting October, November for resident and stakeholder. So this would be a combination of resident, stakeholder meetings. So, and I think these meetings would be more positive meetings, because it's not quite the same as here's an LTP with some rates movements, right? And tell us what you think and tell us what you don't like and things like that. And sometimes those aren't particularly nice feedback meetings. But if we're going out there with, here's some exits, here's some consequences, here's the reductions, here's some consequences, tell us what you think. There'll be a mix of people that might, want to go down that pathway. I would hope it'd be a mix of people that will be saying, hey, we don't want to lose this, we don't want to lose that. We're happy to pay for this and that. And it becomes more of a, genuine feedback approach. So I'd be certainly thinking that those meetings would be far more positive, far more of value to everybody. So I think we would be including those. And then something that we need to change from the consultation document, we really need to, have good information around, what is the exit of, let's say, what are we going to say about those grants, and pull together the information for that and turn that into part of the feedback form, do it for the others. What is the reduction in things? So it's going to be a more comprehensive thing, but we need to be outside the rules for the consultation document. We need to be able to use it as feedback. Peter will be making sure that things are legally correct, Peter, aren't you? So that we're very clear that this is not LTP consultation. It's pre-consultation. It's engagement. It informs our budgets and our formal consultation and our putting together the LTP. But it does give us a lot more flexibility around how we produce these feedback forms. And I would see a combination of feedback online and in manual form and public meetings, but that's what we're proposing.
I agree that that's a good idea, but it's a pity it wasn't at the same time next year, because on those October, November, things are going to be cranky this year with the election on and getting engagement. This is going to be, it's going to be a cranky central government election, and it's just whether, with that noise going on, could we just get a good idea just could get lost of it.
I actually go the other way, because I think our communities are more engaged in what we're doing than, because they know the central government doesn't seem to care. Sadly, I like that it's got, that it's nowhere near March, but like how we did our survey with Mayoral Forum and our survey, I know a lot of people didn't do our survey, they did the other one and they didn't realise, because they were too close together.
I'm not questioning the idea. I hope
No.
I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
it could be a lot of noise at this, through October this year. Yeah.
What, for me, my train of thought is though, rather than go into resident and stakeholder meetings, I think once we combine all our thoughts around our findings and what the staff are doing, we actually narrow down what is achievable and what is, we'll know what's achievable and what isn't. We highlight the areas that we want to go out feedback on to our staff. I reckon we go out with the feedback survey first, get that information back, look at it, and then go out and do the resident stakeholder meetings based on the findings from that feedback, present it to them.
Well, that way, if you give the feedback first, give them, you know,
What's
then
coming.
they're not fronting up at a meeting going, oh, I'm going to stir this and I'm going to do this, and they actually come with a more positive attitude in the first place.
Well, they come to a meeting where we're presenting our
We-
findings from the feedback survey, and we can actually talk them through what we've actually looked at in the bigger picture, but we know it's not achievable, that we can't do away with those services. But this is what we've highlighted. What's your opinions on this, please?
So I would suggest for the survey in October, which is when the elections are, we can't do anything about that, right? And then we sort of schedule for meetings in November.
Late November,
once we've
yeah.
seen it. I haven't followed the sequence, your worship, so that's fair if that's what people.
Well, I'm just trying to think of narrowing stuff down because, well, we're elected members. We've been put here to lead, so if we can't narrow it down and notice what's achievable and non-achievable, well, what are we doing here? So let's do that component, go out for feedback of what we think we can improve on or do away with, get their feedback, and then we go to the meetings and say, well, this is the findings. How do you like it?
I mean, just trying to think of how people putting this together and that.
Yeah, is it too soon though, October? It's not that far away.
No, but we might do it in stages too, your worship. I mean, we might do, thinking of how we would craft everything. You know, there's a big chunk of work to put together what does 25% reduction look like and all that side of it. Funnily enough, it's probably easier to write up feedback around what happens if you exit something. So the stages might be we do a feedback on the exit side of things. What do people think about that? And then we do a second one around the cost reduction strategies around that side. Still build it within the month of October, and then move into November for that. That would give us more time to because we have to work it through too. We have to look at what are you proposing? Does that make sense from our perspective? And then okay, that's reasonable. We could actually do that if we had to. So yeah, I just think, Jules, I think it's definitely easy to put out something around what happens if you exit something and the consequences, right?
Yeah.
Throw that out there as a separate stage. And then there's two parts of work.
Because I appreciate the 25% reduction. Wouldn't be a hell of a lot of work in that?
Well, you have to do it for the stuff there, but
work in that.
but I still, I mean, we would still have to target it, and we would need to do that. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's about the idea is to say, well, how much do you think we might save, and what are the consequences of that in terms of what we look at.
So when we're going out for resident stakeholder engagement meetings and so forth, we've actually got that information that we can actually talk to them about inflation, what it actually looks like, the consequences of it. in that respect, but,
I mean, I've got to talk to comms and other things around, how we pull that together, but, that sort of staging is, looking ahead, trying to be easier for ourselves to make it. We still have to pull them together. Like we have changed the LTP timing that we weren't going to have everything completed before Christmas. We were shifting it right into January, February, and we were shortening that side of things, that end of it. So this will help us pull things together anyway. The trick will be how we get from you the end result of receiving all that feedback, and then what's done for a budget and a conservation document. Because you won't have that same ability to go out so openly in the LTP. You would have to craft a budget that you're proposing to go with, and that. So we will need to make sure that you can give direction so that we can populate along a budget. It's easy for us, isn't it, to go out and I'm saying, oh, it's easy, it's flexible, exit strategy here, 25% reduction there. But from that, we need to build a quality time with you so that you can help us build a budget that we would then go out with. So that is something we shouldn't probably underestimate for that. And we'll need to make sure we build that in.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too, though, is going to be what our findings are. Like, it's pretty, well, you've got the need to haves, identify the need to haves, and what are the nice to haves. And that's what we're going out to. Brendan.
Through you, on just going back a couple of slides to the 25% department cost reductions overall. Has it been done before, Steve? And is there an option to sort of try and keep the same level of service, but have a way look at how we're doing the work internally, operationally in the departments, i.e. As things are open, have we got too many staff in that department? Perhaps not enough. Use of vehicles and all that sort of stuff. I see there's I've got a few scenarios, but I can't really name them because they'd be naming departments on that, but we could make savings operationally.
Well, that's what's if I tell them 25% reduction, then they have to find solutions. And if the solution is to
keep that level of service as well as the thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean that's a challenge in that sense. I mean, we'd be suggesting that there's a huge amount of fat in the organisation if we were to keep level of service without making any reductions in things. And I'm sure that all organisations can make savings in some form, so it's a good target to have.
But if you've got any suggestions, I think that could potentially go back through portfolio leads to the GMs.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a good way so they could then see if those things can be part of those savings. But yeah, I think that would be a good way to do it.
That makes sense because we've sort of talked with Mike and their portfolio on some of the stuff.
But that's if the GMs already haven't looked at that, been viewing that.
Well, then they can provide that feedback back to the members. So.
Cool. Yeah, in today's economic environment, though, with escalating costs and that sort of thing, it's a big ask.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, we have made, because of the deficit issue, we have looked at a number of areas, so Linda's area was looking at reducing deficit and making the changes, the contract saving changes, which we're trying to put in place there for the different type of contract or maintenance. We know Donna's come in and looked at the definitely the areas in terms of the waste and found areas there that we've been able to make. Those have been reported on, right? So like Donna might moan at me and say, well, I could have met the 25% reduction if I hadn't done anything this year and just brought it into the budget, but I've already done it, right? And I've saved you 25%. Well, thanks, Donna, but tough. We'll relook at things again. So, it's not like the organisation hasn't been looking at, cost reduction side of things, and that has just kept on burgeoning and burgeoning, because the deficit has been a leveler for us, right? We've been having to focus on trying to reduce that deficit that has been the operating deficit that's been in.
Yeah, what I was going to mention it before, but I suppose now we're talking about it, is there's a couple of things been highlighted. The first was the slides on the rating examples and the impact of taking the water out. And it was also highlighted with this year's actual rates with the rural without water. The rural without water this year, the rates increased from 1% to 2%. So even, and I've just been calculating, say, Balclutha without water. If we go back 3 years ago, Balclutha without water would have been $1,868. And on this year's current rating plus that 4% without water, it would be 2,197. So it's actually, we've got to be real careful. The real issues for all rating has been water. The actual council cost for every other service hasn't really shifted much at all. It's only in this very single percentages.
You're blaming Linda's department then?
I'm not blaming. Well, it's a consequence right across the whole country for rate payers across the whole country. But the heat comes on the council fully on all the other services. So we're looking to chop and just jiggle around in this. Yeah, we haven't been running wild. Did not say water's been running wild, but outside of water, the actual costs have not shifted much.
Yeah.
Not much above the rate of inflation.
And I mean, we've been trying to say that forever, but it's not so much that, Your Worship, because we have to be fair to people, isn't it? I mean, the ratepayer just sees the bottom line big increase in the dollars, right? And nobody can take that away from them. But the view that we've just been rampantly spending on discretionary related staff and the figures are there. We know what that actually looks like, but it doesn't stop where we are today. We did say the solution was to try and, which is why we ended up voting to go with 3 waters and things like that. We have to be serious. There's going to be a water bill, but taking it away from us and trying to manage it ourselves and trying to put it into an entity that has got to at least try to be more efficient because it's a bigger scale and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? It's about the only thing that we could see was a solution.
But we can, like a 10% reduction, you can wipe 10% out of everything else, and yet you're really not going to have a big impact on a household's costs. The heat needs to, so we've got the opportunity here, especially when we're going out there, to highlight the impacts of removing the water, what it looks like on your rates bill. That's going to be a key part of this consultation. The other thing I think we need to do, when Southern Water's Done Well was formed, I always thought we need to give them a period of grace, but I think we've got to go in hard as a shareholder right from the start, saying you cannot. If this bill has got through the shareholders group, because that's the key one for people's household costs is still the water, and we just cannot give them. I think no, they've got to go right from the start.
But which also re-emphasises the journey we're on at the moment. Like we're not doing this exercise to justify our existence. We're doing this to show the ratepayer what it actually takes for the organisation to operate and perform and provide the level of services that they've been given. Let them make the choice whether they think that level of service is rubbish or it's great. But we're presenting them with the facts, and if they're still not happy with it, well, you tell us what you don't want.
Yeah, but
we can't do any more than that.
Yeah, I know. But
we cannot do any more than that. But at the same breath, we need to have it front of mind and tell our ratepayers that you will be receiving 2 invoices come 1 July next year.
But the danger, the one that's still in risk of leaping dramatically, it's the water bill.
Oh, certainly. We've seen that for a long time. Look at the Prime Minister's comments with Wellington Water today. I know.
Your Worship, and councillors, I mean, Jules mentioned it, just in the back of my mind. I mean, if we went out with, you know, the things that we're suggesting, but if we also went out and said, hey, you know, all intents and purposes, your urban rates are going to drop 50% or whatever to this amount, do you think that would have a material impact on, you know, what people come back with? You know, does it even call into question, you know, we're doing this because we're sitting at all up what we're doing at you know, 30% and things like that at the moment. Do you think the whole thing is moot if we were going to go, oh, well, you're going to lose, you know, 50% or more and drop that down in rates? Or do you think it still is valuable, but we should still be showing, you know, rural, urban, so it's in the back of mind when they're asking, you know, when they're giving you the feedback? It's an interesting point, isn't it? It's like if we give them no context, what will be the context that people will be thinking about is the massive rises we had this year. And then they'll be giving us feedback on the basis of how they felt about that, right? If we give them context that says, well, you know, you're losing 3 waters, yes, you're going to get a water bill, can't control that, but your rates from here are going to drop, whatever it is going to drop. And we're asking you to say, you know, give us your views on exiting and 25%. It'll be a different view. I mean, it's a bit like when you do a survey, it depends when you're going to do a survey in terms of what you get. I don't think there's a win-win on any of that. I think it's just something that we need to be aware of, and I don't know, what's your views on that side?
But it could be a consequence too after the staff have done their research and that, and you could be right. The percentage might be no savings at all. Well, we could be delivering a premium product, value for money. But the staff might turn around and say, but hey, like, we can't find much of a saving here, but we could actually be a bit more efficient. We could possibly provide an added bonus service to the ratepayer for the same money. Well, I'd class that as a win.
Yeah, there's always going to be, like what Brendan mentioned before, there's probably always efficiencies in the organisation somewhere, but the risk is if you could be really miserable and cut a few things out, save the ratepayer $50 and have a miserable town or whatever. So that's yeah.
Well, that's it. And I see in one of the slides there we had like the dog control and do less, but then do we want a child in the district getting mauled to death by a bloody dog? It'd be the last thing you'd want on your plate, wouldn't it? So
there was a whole range of, through you, Your Worship, a whole range of reductions made about 15 years ago in one of a neighbouring council to the north, and they reduced their mowing and all this sort of stuff. And you just see constantly complaints coming through the paper about the level of service that people didn't actually want that to change. So that's the risk you can have with that sort of thing, that people don't actually, like the rates, most people don't engage in the actual process, and then they get their rates bill and they go, oh, we weren't happy with that. That can also happen with a level of service review, and they don't actually realise what the consequences will be, or don't take any notice of the process and then complain once it actually happens.
Yeah, for example, the transfer stations. There was a lot of controversy over that. Everyone was like, yes, cut costs, but when you do it, not everybody's going to be happy.
No, they're not, but there's some very major cost-saving measures around there. And your note from an email I sent you, well, there was just this week, there's major cost-saving measures there. So we'll try and our best, and we're acting on what we've been providing.
And I think what Simon said's right, and I used to do noise control for the last 24 years, and like, you drop it, you save a few bucks, but if you're living next door to something that's continues to go and it's mentally disturbing to people and no one else can have the authority to do that, so we might lose some, you know, get over and paying that. Just, yeah, unless you're actually decided that it's going to continue, you don't really know. 80-90% of the people in the whole district won't even have an issue with it, but if it's, you've got one of those neighbours that's causing those dogs and noise or whatever, or the long grass, yeah, the council will go downhill real bad.
Like I say, I think we've got enough experience and skill in the room with the councillors to actually refine that list before we actually go out to feedback. So.
Right, well, that's that last slide then. So, and in fact, we sort of discussed that a little bit about proceeding with it as opposed to not proceeding with it. You know, even with the caveats, we just sort of talked about it and the information we put out there. Is it the view that you would like to proceed along that sort of a
Strategy.
line? So we're putting a bit of effort. It'll involve you guys as well, because obviously there'll be your involvement in the before Christmas stuff. But that would be what we would be aiming to do.
And that's why I think if we do a pre-engagement survey first, we could find out which communities would like to actually, as part of the survey, would you like a community meeting? Then we could be doing our planning. Well, there's no point going out and doing community meetings for the sake of doing community meetings when no one's interested. So.
Okay, well,
I think a bit of massaging and we'll get that around the right way.
that'll be it.
That'll be it.
We can go have morning.
We're going to have morning tea now if we like, and we're reconvening at
Yeah, we did.
10:45. So we're done.
Yeah. Thanks, you.
Thank you for your attendance. See you after. I'll run Mr. Councillor Cotton down some food. Oh, that was good. Turn the key. Welcome back, everybody, to session 4 of the long-term plan. And we are going to move into the transport camp. We've got Cosmos here, Eric Barnes joining us online. And I think James is down the back there for a bit of support. You're the support person, are you, James? Welcome. Welcome, team.
So I've got Eric and Andrew joining online. Can you hear us, gents?
Are they in our team? Or-
Yes, yeah, I can hear you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, councillors, executives, and everyone online. I'm going to work through the chair. I'm going to work through the transport app and the options available for the budget going forward. This workshop is a continuation of the transport amp workshop 1 at the previous council workshop, and in this one, we're going to try and strike a balance between the previously discussed constrained and optimized options, and introduce a third option, which is called the current level of service. This current level of service option is a balance between the constrained and optimized, focusing on the core program, but limiting our non-assisted work categories and some of the targeted network upgrades. Yes, second. The focus for this workshop is 3-part. Part 1 is setting the program or confirming to set the program going forward for the entity bid as the optimized option. Second point is to shape the affordability and seeing if we need to reduce any of the work categories or parts of the optimized and test for consultation. And the third one is confirm if the choices discussed need to go out for consultation for the community. Next slide, please. What we will work through today is a central choice, which is a centralized choice, which is the constrained, current level of service, and the optimized. We will be trying to compare the budgets for each of these 3 options, and that is described in the handouts that was attached to. We will also be looking at what this looks like in evidence of pictures in some of the slides regarding the non-assisted work categories. And the fourth one is the available levers we can adjust from the optimized to show what budgets we can reduce. Next slide, please. This is just to highlight that the optimize is based on the ILM directions provided previously, and these discussion and the optimized is also based on the options to best look at the problems, the benefits, and the responses for our 4 transportation problems, which is the heavy freight demand, our low or weak asset condition and risk data, increasing severe weather and drainage, and our aging population and poor accessibility. The benefits discussed and used for comparison in the handouts are the value for money, the performance, reliability, and resilience of the network, the district attractiveness, and the community safety and satisfaction. Next slide, please. How the numbers will work for this discussion is everything is based, or the baseline numbers for being compared to is, you'll see at the bottom of this slide, is the current budget approved in the previous LTP 24-34 for the period 27 through 30. And our current budget for the 24-27 NLTP of around about $61.6 million. These are the option comparisons. The constraint, looking at a 3-year gross budget of 54.1 million, and this is about 7.5 million less than our current budget and 17 million less than the previously approved baseline budget of the 24-34. Current level of service is targeted at about 67.3 million, which is 5.7 less than our current budget, 3.9 million less than the baseline of the 24-34 NLTP. And
sorry, I was just going to message Donna. Can you mention the fourth option we had last time too, and why it's not there?
Yes, the fourth option is the enhanced. It is in the handouts. It is previously it was discussed as very high at 86.3 million for the 3-year total cost. Do I need to elaborate on that?
Oh no, it's more just reminding councillors we did have a higher level of service option that we talked about in the last workshop, but now we're focusing on the optimised to the constrained rather than increasing the level of service.
Yes.
Just a reminder, really.
Yes. And then look at the next. This is what we're looking at based on the previous outcome. Optimize is still what we would like to go to for NZTA for our current bid. And this is looking at the comparison between the optimized and the current level of service options. For the footpath and accessibility, we're looking at 2.34 million more in the optimized than in the current level of service bid. In the non-assisted local services, we're looking at about 300,000 more than the current level of service. And for the targeted changes, which is drainage, safety promotions, traffic services, rehabilitations, and environmental maintenance, is about 1.5 million more than the current level of service. We also identified that the bridge work the idea is to keep the same as the current level of service for optimized. Yes, so this is just a visual representation of what we are likely to see on each of the options. For the constraint, we are looking at road pavements that deteriorating a little bit more. We're looking at more street litter restrictions. Bridge restrictions remain, less street sweeping, more noxious weeds, and footpath conditions degrading over time. Next slide. For the current level of service we are focusing more on maintenance rather than improving. So we would likely see the road pavements getting a little worse, but not falling to bits, similar to the current constraint. We are looking at more of a current level of service or a current level of roadside vegetation, similar to our current bridge restrictions, because we will be trying to improve the bridges. We are looking at reducing the non-assisted, which is currently the street sweeping, which should look something similar to what we are currently seeing, and there would not really be an improvement on footpath maintenance or footpath condition. And then for the optimized, which is what we are looking for, or trying to look for, is improved unsealed roads, improved sealed roads, upgrading our footpaths to improve accessibility, and upgrading our bridges to match the requirement for NZTA to open the net to 50 max. This is starting to looking at the levers available to council. Now this is focused on the optimized work budget and what we can reduce in level 1 is footpath and accessibility of the 3-year period. The optimized level is we are looking at spending 3.56 million. For the current level of service in this level, we are looking at a reduction of 2.34 to current level of service and spending about 1.22 million. And for the constraint, even less, looking at spending 1.08 million. We're also looking at some experiences that the residents would see and strategic trade-offs. Residents would most likely see poorer footpaths conditions, slower removal of trip hazards and footpath conditions. Accessibility and improvements are going to be delayed, and satisfaction is likely to remain under pressure. Customer satisfaction.
So just on that, Pierre, so at this stage, we're assuming we're going to be putting this forward as part of our assisted program. I know last time we talked about doing some of this work unassisted versus assisted, so just wanting to confirm this will be included in our budgets as part of our assisted program rather than non-assisted. Is that correct?
For these ones on optimized level, yes, it would. If we're looking at the current level of service and the constraint, no. We are looking to reduce the non-assisted work categories.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I just wanted to make it clear for the council that we're proposing to submit these as part of our assisted program. And
yes.
If that gets cut back like it did last time,
yep.
We'll be coming back to council in about a year's time to talk about what the options are moving forward for footpaths.
Correct. Lever 2, next slide. Lever 2 is the targeted safety and freight access improvements for the next 3 years, similar to the previous slide. We are looking at the improvements, as Joel said, to be included in the optimized program. However, with the current level of service and the constraint level of with the constraint option, we are looking at possibly reducing the budget for these work categories. And there would be resident experiences, delayed bridge renewals, limited reductions and potential increases in restrictions across the network, decrease in customer levels of service, and a decrease in regional freight.
They're both the same figure.
For the current level of service
And
and optimized, we are looking to try and maintain the core business and improving the network, because we are looking at bridge renewals that are likely to be funded. For the constraint level of service, we're trying to maintain and not do as much improvements, just trying to maintain what we currently have.
If I can just jump in here too, Pierre, because I think this is a really good slide to give some real clarity to the councillors. We really want to, for you to focus on the bridge renewals money here, the 2.68 million, just to be really aware that because our bridges currently aren't meeting the funding requirements with NZTA under work category 216. If you recall, the prior years we've had to have discussions with the NZTA, and we were successful to get that funding moved to the low cost, low risk for this financial year, because our bridges were basically in a better condition than what they're now requiring, because historically, I think it was back in 2018, NZTA had funded and agreed to bring forward a 30-year bridge renewal program into a 10-year period. They've now changed that criteria that it has to reach net present value end of life for a bridge before they'll fund it under category 216. If that is all the criteria, and if our bridges are still exceeding that criteria, the risk is that the 2.68 million may not be funded, and we could be in a position that NZTA may decline our request to move that money into work category 341, which is low cost, low risk.
I think we can go on to the next lever. Next lever is the non-assisted local services, and this is where we are trying to reduce some of the non-assisted, non-funded work from NZTA. And for the optimized, we are trying to keep it at our current expenditure for the levels, for our current expenditure. For the current level of service, and the constraint is we are trying to reduce as much as we can to essentially save as much as we can. The three main non-assisted services is street cleaning, car parks maintenance, and noxious plant control. The trade-off is for street cleaning is more litter, visible debris, and potential less frequent sump and gutter clearing. For the car park maintenance, is more weeds and potholes and greater renewal work later. And noxious plant control is, we obviously see a lot more noxious weeds around the district.
So under the optimised, which is, what's the difference going to be? We're seeing the trade-offs here at the lower end, but what are the benefits for going optimised?
Optimized is keeping our current expenditure for these for these work categories. So we're not trying to not reduce any of our expenditures.
I know, just highlighting the fact that you've got a lot of trade-offs in here on the worst case scenario, but we're actually not seeing, apart from those glossy photos at the front, what the best case scenario is going to look like.
So just on that one, Pierre, through further to me, Martin's question, is the extra $200,000 to enable us to continue doing what we're doing now, or is it to do more work in street cleaning?
Do it better.
Yeah, because it is an increase from the current level of service on the numbers.
The current level of service. The current level of service mentioned in this option is the option. It's not maintaining. How do I explain this?
Is it the money we're currently spending, but to continue to do that, we need to allow for an increase?
The current level of service mentioned in this slide is a current level of service option for the bid. It's not the current budget.
So just to help out here, the optimise is basically providing what we currently provide, our current level of service with inflation factored in. To respond to your question, Your Worship, at our last workshop, we did present the enhanced options, and at that stage, my understanding was the team was requested not to pursue that any further, and that was giving us a better level of service at an additional cost of, from memory, about $14 million more than.
So then, Donna, the optimised is what we currently have with increases in whatever, just to keep at that level, what we've already been having.
It's providing our current level in a lot of areas. It's also enhancing or requesting additional budget for the area. If we go back to the slide, hang on, I might be able to see it here. For drainage maintenance, as an example, because we recognise we could definitely do more water tabling across our rural network. And so it's just increasing some areas with that. So maintaining what we currently do and requesting to increase budgets in certain work categories to enable a slightly higher level of service in some areas where, particularly in water tabling, for those of us who aren't aware, water is the biggest enemy for our roading network. And if we ensure that the drainage, the water tabling is clear and flowing well, that's certainly going to make our roads last longer.
Okay. We go to the next slide. Levers to consider. As previously mentioned, the levers to consider are those three: footpath accessibility, the bridge work, and the non-assisted level. This is all in comparison to the optimized, as Donna just explained, the optimized versus what we can reduce and still keep the optimized option. This is a total savings on the optimized budget, or on the optimized option budget, of 5.3 million across these three levers. If we look at, next slide, please. if we look at these three levers all pulled, it is a hybrid program. It is not, even though the budget is similar to the current level of service option budget, it is not the same because we are focusing on different work categories. Before we go on to the next slide, is there any questions on that? Okay, if we go to the next slide, I would like to hand over to Cosmos as he can really explain the next.
To your worship, I'm going to just take you through the long-term renewal funding approach. As Jules alluded to in the earlier workshop, in the earlier session, we had previously provided some background around the annual depreciation and what direction we intend to take in terms of funding renewals going forward for transportation. And I just want to reiterate that we've got a 2026 valuation report in an advanced stage now. It's not yet finalized, but it's advanced now. So the valuation is done on a benchmark, which is based on industry standard national averages of in terms of parameters like useful life, for example. So it's not an accurate representation of the state of our local assets here and what our funding needs are. So the valuation report came with an addendum that recommended an alternative method to fund renewals going forward, which is a cash flow funding model. And I know Jules had previously presented on this, but what it's just doing is you have a notional account, and what the consultants did was they arrived at a figure of 13.5 million that should allocate every year, the next 50 years, 50-year horizon, I think, and you would fund your renewals from that account. But the graph that you're seeing there is what the balance would be in your notional account. So from the first year, you can see that you're almost at par with what you're allocating, but then it starts accumulating because you'll be spending less than what you're allocating, which is 13.5 million. And then at some point down the line, where you've got significant capital works, like structures and bridges, you then draw down from that account. And that sort of gives you the comfort that you've got enough funding set aside to finance your renewal needs. And you do not necessarily need to use annual depreciation as a proxy for your funding requirements. So just for context, over the past 3 years, or the current 3-year NLTP that we're in, we've got an average of 11.84 million per annum for capital work, and the optimized program that PA is proposing has 12.2 million of capital work per annum over the next 3 years, and that's not including project management allowance, which will be worked out in the future. But it just shows you that it is within the range of what the valuers have estimated is what we should put aside every year to fund our capital program. We can go to the next slide. So like I said, this is comparable to the allocation that has been recommended. And of course, the allocation would slightly be more like in this case, so that you accumulate some buffer ahead of significant capital works that would happen sometime in the future. So we are proposing to fund a cash flow allocation of 13.5 million per annum. That's what we're proposing to do in terms of future renewal funding approach. We will then be able to refine this when we do the next budgeting cycle in 3 years' time, because again, this is influenced by assessing the condition of the network as we get more information, as unit rates of delivering capital change. That needs to be looked at again. So that will be refined in 3 years' time. If council opts to change the level of service, like reduce the level of service either after consultation or as a decision, what it means then is we'd have to recalculate the annual allocation that we have to put into that account, and that's to conform with the projected level of service. That has got an implication of how much life you're going to be giving to the different assets. But whichever level of service or whichever option council takes, the cash flow approach remains the recommended method in terms of future renewal funding. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
For the for the summary, I would like to call on Eric Barnes to explain and ask the last 3 questions. Eric Barnes is our consultant from Exilium.
Just looking at the summary slide here, there's really 3 things that we just wanted to talk through with you and confirm direction on. The first is around the program to submit to NZTA. In the workshop we had previously, there was support and direction to us to proceed with the optimized program, but there were questions asked. Hopefully these have been answered now. We made some fine-tuned adjustments and brought back some potential levers, which we'll talk about in a second. We were seeking confirmation of the direction that we would put in to NZTA for co-funding of the 71.5 million optimized program option. The second thing to consider then is the 2 elements that we talked about with footpaths and accessibility, and the targeted freight bridge improvements. Those 2 options there in the optimized program, we would put forward seeking co-funding. We will not know the outcome of that for several months, as we've talked about before, and along the timing of NZTA's response. There is consideration here for us to how we approach that. One is thinking about if it's not co-funded, how council would like to proceed, and either indicating that if it's not co-funded, that it's not something we would proceed with, and or consideration of maybe consulting on those 2 elements, as those 2 would then need to be fully funded by council. And that includes the footpaths and the targeted freight, which for footpaths, just a reminder, was 2.34 million, and the bridge work was the 2.68 million. The last thing to consider was the non-assisted work. We suggested within the optimized program that there's potentially 300,000 worth that we could look at reducing a level of service. That is something, again, that council could give us direction on whether they're happy just to proceed as is with the current optimized program, or if they would like us to look at potentially putting that in for consultation. So there's a few options sitting there. One, we move to the last slide, is really choosing our starting point, just reconfirming your direction around the optimized program going into NZTA, seeking co-funding on all of that work, and then identifying whether or not which option we would like to consult on. So that's around the potential for the footpaths and the bridges, not obtaining co-funding from NZTA, whether or not you wish to proceed forward with those as non-funded, and then the non-assisted, that 300K. So we'll just open the floor for any questions and discussion.
Just before we do, I think just want to give some visibility to the councillors that last NLTP round, we requested for the 24-27 financial year period, we requested $66 million of funding and we only received 60 million. So even though we may be requesting our optimised request, it's highly probable that we won't receive all of that. So I just want to give you real clarity that, as Jules mentioned earlier, our preferred option is to request what we know we need, because it's highly probable it might be cut back, rather than requesting the lower value and that being cut back again.
Simon?
So when you get that amount, and if it's less than what we asked for, we don't have the ability to reallocate into different avenues, do we?
What do you mean, outside of roading or within roading categories?
Within roading. So say we get 60, we apply for 60 million and they give us 50. Do we still have to spend it in the same proportions as what we asked?
Not necessarily. So they've made it, it's a tighter criteria now. It's almost like little subgroups that you can move the funding around from one work category to another. Historically, you used to be able to move around all of the work categories, but central government has changed that. So you can within reason.
Any more questions?
I suppose I have. So if we don't get that money, where are we taking the other 6 million from that we need to do the service?
We don't do this. We don't do the extra work.
We don't do the extra work.
So, and through you, Your Worship, that would be like what happened last time round. Yeah. We came back to council and said, this is what they've given us and this is what they haven't. And those questions about footpaths and bridges, given that we will get a decision about this after we've already set our next long-term plan, they're probably a consultation question for the following annual plan, just because of the timing. But who knows? In the past, they haven't really given us much of an indication earlier. They've waited until the final decisions have been made. But yeah, those things that were on the previous slide, absolutely agree. There will be questions for council to consider, but probably in the next annual plan rather than through the LTP.
Roger.
Thank you, Your Worship. With all that in mind, why wouldn't you apply for the enhanced option if we're going to get slashed? And the other thing is, does NZTA, when they look at this, do they have a lot of input into what they think we should be getting? And is that reflected by the amount of funding they give us? What they think, not what we think.
So just to answer Councillor Cotton, we'd be more than happy to put the enhanced request up. However, our direction at our last workshop was that councillors didn't really have the appetite for that, but we'd be more than happy to do that, absolutely. In regards to the second question with NZTA's input, they do discuss with the teams. However, for the councillors that were here last time, if you recall, central government made decisions with the change of government where they actually culled and reduced hugely walking and cycling programs nationally, hence the reason our footpaths budget was reduced by 70%, and central government also made the decision nationally to increase funding in pothole renewal, which our district didn't actually need to the level that we were given. So they actually gave us more money in that area than what we asked for.
Simon.
Yeah. Just in reply to Councillor Cotton there, if we were to ask for the enhanced plan, would also mean we have to rate fund a third of that, which would be an extra $5 million over a 3-year period. But that was my next question. Well, another question on, if we go back to our first part of our workshop, on page 17, we were given an attachment of the total rates bill. Has this draft roading gone into that rates example?
So We haven't provided any rates information at the moment because, as Jules and Steve discussed earlier in the day, that finance is still working through all that.
Although, yeah, because it is actually up about 12 to 15%, which probably indicates that it sort of is.
Yeah.
On this year, yeah.
We can't respond to that at the moment. We haven't been given the information.
Yeah, there's lots of other things that need to be worked through there. The main change that was made was around those internal residual costs being reallocated. But I would have to check with Sharon whether it was I'm assuming it was what was in the LTP for those years, but that's not this program. And I think changes in overheads and changes in a few other things will potentially be bigger than the change in the program.
Yeah, but it will, if we're going to go from a spend of 60 to 70 million, it will add another $1 million onto what needs to be rated.
Absolutely, and that's why you need to. That's why I think in that the addendum we added as well is it's going to be really hard to add it in. We will be able to take it away later on, but that we're still not going to know what NZTA is going to give us until after we've set the LTP.
Yeah.
Now, what we did do last time as well is we actually moved 15% of our funding out of year 1 into year 3 to try and offset, but to make sure we didn't overrate in year 1. So that's potentially another option that we could look at from a funding perspective once those rates figures start to come together.
And another question too. Sorry, Donna. On that, when I talked about reallocation before, would footpaths be part of that? If say we couldn't do some work on another stream, would we?
No. They've really ring-fenced that category grouping.
Yeah.
But just to sort of support what Jules was saying, until all the really great work's getting done behind the scenes in regards to the overheads and the rating impact, our preference, if the councillors agree, is for us to request the optimised with NZTA, because we can always go back to them and say, following consultation and councillor decisions, we're now doing a reduced program, rather than us going in at a lower level and then it's highly probable we wouldn't be able to ask for additional funding.
Councillor Cotton, thank you, Your Worship. So getting back to my point before and Councillor McAtee's answer, what happened last time, there was a reduced amount of funding come from the NZTA, so that meant that council would be less than what they proposed or went out to consultation on. So, for example, you asked for 70 million and you got 60, so there's probably a $3 million saving or $3.5 million saving in that. Is that what happened, or did the rating part of it stay the same?
No, that was why we actually moved 15% from year 1 to year 3 to try and avoid that, because that means we've got the ability to do that later on. If everything we asked for was funded, we haven't done it at that level. Now, the reduction could have been more than that, or they could have said, yes, we're going to give you that. But yeah, we probably can't really completely answer that until we come back with everything. But yeah, absolutely, once our program got reduced, we reduced what we were planning to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The optimised. Eric and Andrew, one thing is joined late in the morning of the workshop, but we're certainly, I'm not sure if you're aware that the rural component of our rates, now that we're losing our 3 waters, our rural sectors, the roading component is going up quite considerably. And yet our rural roads are so important to our network within the district. We get lots of complaints, well, in the short term that I've been in council, we get a lot of complaints about our roads, that people say our roads are rubbish, they're crap, and yet our neighbouring councillors from Gore tell me that our roads are really good compared to their roads. But I really struggle. I ask people when they complain about their roads, I say, what's wrong with their roads? Because we live rurally, like, what's wrong with a bit of sheep shit and a bit of mud on your truck or your car? That's what happens on a rural road. We live rural, so, it's not Tass Hill. So it's hard to work out why people are actually complaining because we're rural people. We have sheep shit and we have mud, and that's a fact of life. We ain't getting away from it. But for me, I like that optimised. If we're going to fall short, and the other thing, our rural trucking companies, their roads aren't that great when they're. I know nothing about trucks and that sort of thing, but I know they're big and they get stuck, and it takes a lot to tow them up the hill. If their roads are no good, and if their bridges are no good for our trucks to get across, well, we need to have better bridges. So I think we should be shooting for the stars, personally, is my thoughts. But it's just a consequence of living rurally. So.
I think thanks, Rachel. I think you make a good point there about bridges, because we're now being told by NZTA our bridges are too good to actually qualify for being renewed, yet they've still got restrictions that prevent 50 max going on. So we've sort of been given mixed messages from NZTA on that front.
Any more questions or feedback? Bruce, you evening.
Is there anything in the pipeline re gravel in the rivers, like other counties are doing, which can save our bridges a bit more?
That's
Sorry, through you, Chair. Can you repeat the question?
No, it's all right.
Through your worship, I think the regional council's made it really clear any gravel extraction is a different issue that they look at on a case by case basis. So that's a regional council issue at this stage. Who knows where it's going to go? Could be.
Well, the team are looking for a bit of feedback, a bit of direction here.
I think the optimised is the only way to do it.
Yes, I agree. Optimise.
Councillor McAtee.
Yep, no, I'm happy to go with that. I asked questions last time and I'm quite impressed the staff that last cover that we got with the breakdown in the LPP from last time and previous, that was good to see the comparison of where the spends were going to be. So, yep, I'm comfortable with that.
So if that's the case, then the next question is to set the portability position. What 3 levers should we test to reduce the rates requirement?
Through the Chair, that is those 3, as in the slide just before this, that the footpath accessibility and the targeted bridge funding, if we need to reduce those ones, and if that is a consultation question, public consultation question rather than.
I suppose through you, Wisher, too. We talked about this morning about going out with some pre-consultation, so there could be some of these roading questions that are part of that might inform the LTP. So that's part of a wider level of service question, and that would be. I mean, if we look at 25%, the amount we spend in roading is pretty big. So that would be certainly some key questions for the community about that. That would be a pre-LTP.
Pre-LTP consultation.
Which would tidy up number 3 there too.
Correct.
But we would come back with those options to save and what it would mean if there was less milling on the roads or less grading on the roads or whatever the team come up with.
I think your ratepayers probably feel that they pay for footpaths, but they don't realise that there is no rate for footpaths. So then you could obviously put a question in there: are you prepared to pay for the extra on your rates for footpaths?
Yep.
Because I mean, as we know fully well, all of our communities are getting older, and we are living longer. And this one that has to have hip replacements all the time. I don't want to be tripping over the footpath. I want some smooth ones out there. So yeah. So I mean, it's quite a valid question to put out there to our ratepayers.
Sounds like you've got a conflict of interest there.
Let's get the wheels on the buggy.
Yeah.
Off-roaders.
Just one thing that the only risk I see with not going for the shooting for the stars is if our friends give us the full amount of funding, and then we're going to have to increase our rates to cover that.
I think that was one of the things we sort of stressed in that addendum we put out, is that there's subject to that consultation, we can still say, actually, we need to adjust some of these, and we're not gonna be seeking to take all of that up. So that will be in place before NZTA have made their final decision on it.
Yeah. And I've got full confidence in Donna's department, Councillor Cotton, that they'll find 25% reduction, and it'll pick up the slack if they do give us the full amount to optimise. So,
Share your confidence.
yeah. Eric and Andrew, yeah, hey, thanks for your help involved with the staff and the team. Nothing wrong with skill. It's great to have skill around the table. So yeah, thank you for your contribution to the staff. I think that's about us.
That's it.
Thank you very much. The team's been great to work with.
Lovely, great to hear. Thank you very much.
So just to confirm, did we get confirmation that we can submit the optimised?
Mhm.
Just making sure.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Right. Session 5, Community Services Strategy. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Your Worship. So this item relates to a draft community services strategy, the intent of which would be, I guess, to provide an overarching direction for the various services, facilities, and partnerships that underpin, support community wellbeing across the district. So the outcome. So we've obviously prepared a draft strategy, and what we're after in this session is to get your direction on the key elements within that strategy. Obviously, we're aware of other discussions that are going on, including this morning, and that I understand that it may stay in a draft format for quite some time, but and that it's going to have to align with budgets, level of service reviews, etc., that are going on. But I guess it's still, we thought it was a good time to present this strategy to you in its draft form, get your feedback. So just to recap, I guess, what are we talking about here? As I say, community services in this context is really that broad network of facilities, services, also those relationships that we have with our partners. And it is extensive across the district relative to our population size and the rating base. And it obviously spans at least 9, by my count, urban centres, depends how you define them, and a very large rural area. So the intent really through this strategy that we're looking to achieve here, really in a nutshell, is to consolidate that footprint. We're not looking to expand that network in any way. We're just really looking to protect it, our existing network of facilities, libraries, pools, halls, etc., and being as efficient as we can about how we deliver those things. Keeping in mind that we need to keep up with our maintenance and renewals so that we don't end up with large bills in the future. So happy to push on. I guess a little again, just in terms of background, why have we decided to produce this strategy? 2 key reasons. I guess the first one is that with the restructure that happened last year, we've had a number of different activities and teams that have come together. So the strategy is one way to coordinate those activities within that one department. And that's just our line diagram of the various activities that come within community services. Previously, I think by my count, at least 3 different areas that they sat under previously, under one. And next slide, please, Peter. I guess, as I said earlier, just really the intent of this is to sustain those relationships and facilities and services that create, or make the district a great place to live and work. So that includes facilities, so pools, libraries, are 2 of the examples that I've included there, and also the services that we provide through those facilities. So community development is one, economic development is another, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, next slide, please.
Sorry, Mike, I mean,
Yep.
I think it's important, the restructure that we did was the first time that we pulled together all community facilities. As Mike said, there were a number of them that were spread out and thrown around different areas that didn't really have homes, weren't necessarily aligned to anything. The intent of the restructure was to identify and highlight that for a district like ours, small rural provincial, the community services side of things is actually really important to the district, and providing a home would have the benefit of trying to align everything together so there's a common purpose, and that there was a reason for things to be happening as a result. So that was the intent of the creation of the department. It is a brand new department, and pulling that together. It's a brand new focus in that sense. So, Mike always said to me that, one of the things naturally that would happen from development in terms of the new department is that there should be a strategy. So, that would be where you would see that coming together in that sense. So that was just helping with some of the context, Mike.
Thank you, Steve.
You didn't just pull it out of nowhere. There's a reason why that you would be considering a strategy.
Mike, excuse me, before you carry on there, just to add a bit of context to the strategy too, going back to the slide around background, why have a community services strategy? How many people in this department?
Well, it varies. We get a little bit of,
It's
movement from days, because with lifeguards and what have you, about 66.
Biggest part of the org in terms of numbers.
Yep, it is. In terms of numbers.
Bigger than Linda's area.
Yeah, it is.
When you think about it, so it has the greatest number of staff.
I think that's important moving forward when you start to talk to us about the strategy and why have the strategy. It actually adds context to where you're going with your journey.
We have a large number of buildings, facilities that we operate one way or the other, from community housing through to halls, museums, etc. Museums, sorry, but and the staff that are required to operate those.
So 66 staff, that's a lot of people. Not just a pretty face,
Couldn't possibly comment. I think we can carry on.
Yeah, I think so. Goals and actions.
So that's the background. We've called these strategic pillars. I guess these are the things that the underlying principles, if you like, that we've built the strategy upon. Again, noting it's draft. Happy to take your direction. And I'm just going to quickly run through those. Happy to discuss them as we go through, if you like. Questions, etc., discussion. First one is about accessibility and equity. As we said before, it's a large district, so we want to try and maintain facilities that we provide so that people can access those reasonably easily, no matter where they live. That includes non-council owned facilities that we support at the moment through grants, so that community owned pools, halls, etc. So that's the first principle, if you like, or pillar of the strategy. Second one is around, obviously, about being financially sustainable, that we really need to continue to evaluate the cost to operate those and support those facilities and the services that we provide against the benefit and the demand. And I guess the residents satisfaction survey is one way that we do that, but we're continually doing that in other ways as well. The feedback that we get is that our service, the facilities and services we provide are in demand, and that they are appreciated. Heritage and cultural identity, obviously, again, the facilities, services we provide enable those things to be brought forward, accessed, so on and so forth. So we think that's really important as well, to place some sort of emphasis on that. Community resilience. So this is about building better people, if you like, about that core social infrastructure role that Lily's team plays around community development and the support roles that her team provides every day. Lastly, as I said, just around making sure that we have a renewal program, that we, managing the risks associated with our facilities through, constantly, updating the condition assessments, renewals, etc. So those are the pillars, if you like, the key things to consider within the strategy. Happy to take any questions on those before we move on.
I've got a question, Mike. So you've done this in conjunction with the living and working strategy that the council's got, correct?
Yep.
So you've called the components of.
So your worship, yeah, that's right. So that's I guess the overarching. It
Right.
identifies that these sorts of things are important. I guess this is, if you like, a step down below that, and actually starting to get drill into. Okay, well, we say heritage is important through the living and working strategy. How do we actually support that? So it's sustained.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mike? Before he moves on.
So the next part of the strategy has some goals and actions which are loosely, I guess, if you like, aligned with those strategic pillars. I wasn't really intending to read those.
Yeah.
But perhaps if we just, touch on each one, and happy to take suggestions, direction on things you might want to include or not include as we look to refine this.
These goals and actions that you've highlighted here, Mike, as part of service levels and that's actually probably already starting to pull it apart, isn't it? Like when you go into with the direction we're headed for reviewing the departments, these are actually really good touch points to be looking at, isn't it? Like your goal one there, maintain equitable access to core services across all main towns, but that sounds quite simple because, all towns, but our district is 633,000 hectares. It's such a big bloody area. We've got to balance everything, what you're working with here, with the actual vastness of our district and how our people can connect with these services. So,
It's certainly going to be impacted by whatever service review we end up with. Mike, instead of going through every single one of the things that I was just trying to find in there was, where did you see the provision and the work associated with grants? I didn't quite see it in those.
Probably we haven't sort of specifically listed that, but probably would be goal 4, I think, around community development. So we talked about funding support for urban and rural committees operating community facilities. So that's grants.
But it's a whole grant process that you are responsible for, isn't it? Through
Yep, true.
But as you said, these weren't all inclusive of everything. They were just ideas and that give it so the council can see what it is that where you were coming from, what you're looking at. Certainly fits within the pillars. But I think the main point is that it was quite good and timely to show that, hang on, there is something there about what does that department do, how does it pull it together, how can it be seen together. But yes, it's going to be subject to the work we're doing with the budgets and the LTP. As a consequence, if you did make changes, if you did exit some things, or you did reduce levels of service, they'd be reflected in the goals and actions. So,
I guess you could say that you're right. that first action is basically what you've been discussing this morning. Confirm what that service level is across a number of things that we're responsible for.
I reckon you've done a great job yourself, Mike, looking at it in every touch point there. Every touch point there, you know, like it's all community. Everything you're touching on here, it's all about community. So, and we know how well all our communities throughout our district identify to their communities and they own it. So it's really good. Thank you. Anything else for Mike?
No, you wish I just agree with your comments.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, as I say, it's going to stay draft obviously for quite some time, but I guess the intent would eventually fit in with the LTP. Exactly how it looks within those documents, I'm not sure, but certainly would be confirmed and available.
So the good thing though is, Mike, you get to sit on that for a while until we see the outcome of the work associated with the LTP, but you can certainly just fill it out relatively easily as a result of that.
I think I firmly believe you've nailed it. You've hit it on the nail on the head. You wanted the council to provide the direction. I think you're on the right track. Would it be fair to say, councillor? You don't need any direction. Just keep following your nose.
Carry on.
Good. Thank you.
That'll do. Thank you.
Session 6, long-term plan. Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the objective of the session is to just review the key stages going forward to complete the LTP and take account of our earlier workshop session in relation to reviews and resident consultation. So the reason I suggest we just check this in is just so we do this occasionally, every third workshop roughly, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as things evolve. And we are making adjustments, as Steve has alluded to earlier, in light of what we need to do and pivots, and we will again, possibly with the needs to accommodate government reforms, depending what comes forward. So just going quickly through this, we've got workshops that we're currently going through in terms of AMP's infrastructure strategy coming forward shortly, as well as financial strategy, early consultation, as we were discussing previously, and that talks to the second dot point. We'll proceed with that as discussed in terms of feedback from residents, October, November. There's a critical workshop aimed for December, where we look in a workshop format at the consultation documentation and get your direction in order to bring that back to a council meeting in January for a final decision on sending it to audit. Now, notwithstanding that we're having that December meeting, there'll be work prior to that, that it's not first as last, it's the November and October workshops will be feeding into that, and particularly November one will be formulating consultation questions, for instance. But now that we've got the feedback coming in from the community processes that we discussed earlier in session 3, that will be, as Steve alluded to, a fairly dynamic process. We'll have to adapt to the concurrent work programs that are going on, which we've done in the past, and I'm sure we'll do well going forward. Going back to the March period following the audit being successful, there's a decision to go to formal consultation required from council, and that will lead to the formal consultation period from, I think from memory, it's around the 8th approximately of March for a month, calendar month, with subsequent hearings in April, around the 20th, I think. We'll give you the firm dates are in the will be in the next year's meetings program, and then a council decisions meeting in May to inform the final LTP decision, final LTP document decision in June. So that's just a quick run through. Through your worship, happy to take any questions.
Questions for Peter, please, team? Bruce?
Yeah, not a question, but a comment. I'm really pleased that the early consultation feedback is October, November, because in the past there has been some over the Christmas break, and traditionally the response is really poor. So nice to see that done and dusted by November.
Quite good, eh? Despite the election.
That's our one, that's not the long-term plan.
Any further comment for Peter?
Nice to know what I'm doing for the next year. Much appreciated.
Oh, well, we're making extremely good time. Thanks, everyone and staff, for your contribution for this morning's workshop. I think we've provided the council with some good clear direction where we're steering, heading to. So I'd like to adjourn the workshop and end the workshop, sorry, adjourn, finish, and we will see us all back here for 1:30 kickoff. Conscientious, you need to take a meeting.
Oh, dear.
Good timing, I told her I'll be on at 12.
Tell her we're bloody efficient.
Yeah,
We're efficient.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
What?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Stuff is